Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 267 of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is David Howe.
My name is Patrick Nisley.
My name is Summer Rain.
And my name is Jordan Willis.
Oh boy, and it's the four of us today. Very excited for today's episode because we are doing a ranking episode, baby. We love ranking episodes. We're doing one for the Donkey Kong Country franchise. Oh boy. And there's not a ton of games in this franchise either, so it's gonna get heated on today's episode. I can't wait to throw a chair at one of you guys. Is this wrestling? Where's Jay? So we're gonna be getting into all that in the main topic, but before that, we also have a ton of news that we're gonna be going over as well. It's been an interesting week in the world of Nintendo and video games. Nintendo dropped a trailer for an M-rated game, which is crazy because we just put out an episode on age ratings. Come on, Nintendo. Some new NSO games dropped for Game Boy Advance, and also there was a Splatfest, and we'll be getting into the results of that, plus much, much more on today's episode. But before we get into that, how are we doing? How's everybody's past week?
Last week, I could not remember what I did 2 weeks prior. This week, I can remember what I did. It was my partner's birthday, so we did some stuff related to that, got some dinner with her family, and then yesterday we went and got a nice brunch at a vegan Japanese sushi restaurant called Nori. It's very good. It's surprisingly good. I like trying a lot of different vegan foods because the innovation is like crazy. Like they had this chicken and waffles for their brunch that was made from mushroom root, and Valerie, when she was trying it, she's like, I don't know if I should be eating this. This tastes like chicken. I know this is a 100% vegan restaurant. This is very strange. And it's just that weird disconnect. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. Anyways, there's a lot of really cool innovation.
That'd be wild if they snuck some chicken into the menu at the vegan restaurant.
Dude.
That'd be wild.
But other than that, dude, playing way too much Donkey Kong Country, which we'll get into, but how's everyone else?
I'm doing good as well. It continues to be sort of a murky time with summer and my wife taking some time off work. And so we're all home and I don't know what day it is, but I can't complain. Things are great. The only bad thing that's happened really is my wife's car's had this problem. We finally got it looked at and it would be really expensive to fix, more than the car's worth. So that's never fun news, though I think we can eke it out for a while longer. I just hate the idea of having to at some point soonish get a new car because I don't know, man. I just, I thought this one would last us longer. So that's the only bad thing. I can't complain. Everything else is really good.
Gonna have to get a new car if you're gonna make it out to the next Trump rally,
Yeah. Let's you know me.
Did you guys hear about that? Did you guys hear what happened?
Oh, God.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Summer, how are you doing?
I am doing really well. If you have 20 friends that are all obsessed with the same franchise as you, I highly recommend all being in a house together for a weekend because that is what I did with Fire Emblem. And
Nice.
Holy broccoli. That's a Yunaka Fire Emblem reference. So they had a pool. So most of my cosplays, like we are all cosplaying, mostly did pool cosplays. There was one person who actually did pull out his entire Ike cosplay and then did a 20-minute presentation on why the cast from I get the Tellius games mixed up. Not the first game with Ike, but the second one with Micaiah.
It's okay. You could literally say anything and we'd all just nod our heads right now.
It's Pat Radiant Dawn because it's the Dawn.
Oh yeah, of course.
So Radiant Dawn, he spent 20 minutes talking about how like all of the characters and like the original characters to that game suck and why you still just want to use the characters from the original game. I did a presentation called Blue Hair and Pronouns where I took every single character in Fire Emblem with blue hair and said what they would respond to if you asked them what their pronouns were. Do y'all know that there's over 60 characters with blue hair in Fire Emblem?
That's exactly how many genders there are. That's crazy.
Did you know that only makes up 3% of all of the characters in Fire Emblem?
Wow. A lot of characters.
It was, it was so much fun. And like everybody, like we took turns like cooking for everybody and just like goofing around and everybody like wrote new lyrics to songs to make them about Fire Emblem. It was just so much fun. And now I'm not there, and I'm back in the real, not Fire Emblem world. I mean, like, I don't want to go to war, but like, hot, sexy fantasy war, maybe. Yeah. I got brunch with my sister this weekend, but I had real chicken and waffles.
Joke's on you, Jordan.
Yeah.
No, it tasted real. That's great. No, that sounds like a dream. I'd say I'd love to do something like that, but I went to Mysterium Con last year, and I did something very similar with a similarly small number of nerds in a room. So I had a really good time doing that as well. But yeah, that's great to hear. I had a pretty good past couple weeks. It was sad to have missed last week's episode. That was a super fun one. When I was editing it, I was like, man, I wish I was really on this show, especially because you guys were talking about a bunch of David ass topics that I was like yelling at the screen on the plane, and people were like, sir, you need to quiet down when I was editing the show. But anyway, but yeah, no, it's great. I had a really good time in New York City. I saw a bunch of friends. I saw a Broadway show. I went to Nintendo World, New York City, the Nintendo store out there, as you do as a host of a Nintendo podcast. It was cool. I got a couple things. I got like a Blastoise plushie you can maybe see back there. And in your honor, Patrick, I got a Piranha Plant amiibo as well. So nice. I got that for you. And so that was nice to go and do that. I had a really great time. Yeah, and I've been playing a lot of my RG 35XX SP. I'll talk about that at the end of the show. But real quick, I do want to say before we move on, I just bought tickets for Japan. So I'm going to be going to Japan October 25th of this year. I'll be there for Halloween and the election day. So I'll be far away from all that bullshit whenever that's going down, hopefully in the Japanese countryside, taking in some shrines and just buying a bunch of like super nerdy retro game stuff when I'm out there. So I'm really excited. Maybe I can put together a vlog or something for the Patreons.
You'll literally just be like cranking a gachapon like as the results are being announced. Just like
yeah. It's like, oh, it's Biden. Excellent. Okay. But anyway, that's my week.
Very nice. Well, as David mentioned, we did an episode last week on age ratings. We had a really great guest in Jared Stoltz from Devolver. And to that point, Dylan Muss over on YouTube said, great guest and episode. Viking Lord Sean said this episode became even more relevant with the trailer for an M-rated Nintendo game just released, which is true. David also mentioned that. And then Curtis3604 said, if Chinese games can't have skeletons, does that mean they don't have Zelda? And that's a good question. Got one more comment kind of related to that from Stop Trying to Find Me, who said, since they're skeletons of fantasy creatures, maybe that makes it okay. Seems like there's some gray area there.
I actually did look that up in response to this question. And I think that the like no skeletons in Chinese games is kind of like a soft rule. There's no like hard and fast rule that you can't have skeletons in video games. It's like under certain circumstances, it's okay. But because it's so murky and it's so hard to tell what is and isn't like okay for the ratings board, most people just avoid it completely. So I think like, a lot of Zelda games have released through like IQ and stuff like that in China, but the Chinese video game industry as a whole is its own whole thing that maybe one day, if we ever understand what's going on over there, we could do an episode on.
Yeah, if we get the right guest. And then over on our Discord, Cool Uncle Vince also mentioned that Balatro got caught up in a ratings change, which we kind of forgot about. And that was sort of related to its gambling, quote unquote, gambling elements. We also got into a good discussion of mobile game ratings on the Discord and, that sort of area. And then unrelated to ratings, DCD asked, what kind of dogs does Jared have jumping a 6-foot fence? Because Jared was talking about that. And that sparked a really interesting and upsetting maybe discussion a little bit of people sharing stories about dogs jumping fences on our Discord.
What's Mega Man's dog's name? I think that's the dog, I think, that can jump over the 6-foot fence.
I don't know
Springs.
the name.
It's got Springs.
Something with
Rush.
Yeah, there you go. So if you want to be part of those conversations, you should definitely come and check out our Discord. And we do appreciate hearing from all our listeners and viewers. And if you have a comment on anything we talk about this week, post it on as a comment on YouTube or come join the Discord, talk there or send us a message and we'll try to shout you out next time. We've also got a Patreon. It's a great way to support our show. Go be a patron on Patreon. And we also could always use your like and subscribe over on YouTube. And with that, we'll get into the news. So we're going to start off with that teaser trailer that Nintendo put out for a mature game. It's got that big mature rating icon in the corner, and it says Emio. Who is Emio? Emio is the name of the video, and then at the end it's like Japanese. It says, "Who is Emio?" Am I right about the translation of that? I don't know. It's just got like a guy with a bag over his head and creepy vibes. That's how I would describe it. What am I missing anything important from this like 10-second video?
It's a Nintendo leaker simulator.
This is what they will do to you.
Right. So POV or you leaked secrets for Nintendo.
It also looks very real. Like it's like
Maybe they're dipping into the live action games, you think?
Or it's just like unrelated to gameplay. I don't know. It's a super weird video for Nintendo.
Yeah.
That's what strikes me the most about it.
Yeah. And it says, the kanji at the end says smiling man. Which I think Emio might mean the smiling man, but it's, it's got the bag on his head with the smiling on it. And it's very creepy. A lot of people immediately were thinking that this is a Bloober Team game, because Bloober Team, who did a bunch of games and they're kind of maligned with fans right now. They're working on the Silent Hill 2 remake, and they did, what was that game?
The Medium.
For Xbox, The Medium, right? Which I started and I thought was interesting enough, but then lost interest in really quickly. But they're supposedly working on a project called Project M for Nintendo consoles, and that was shown through like some sort of call or a ratings thing, or I forget what it was on their website that said that they were working on that. So like Project M, Emio, this looks like a Bloober Team horror thing. But there are a lot of sources that are saying this is not Bloober Team, including some people at IGN. So who knows exactly who it is, but I think a lot of speculation out there is coming out. And apparently Samus Hunter, who's a leaker, is aware of what this game is. They're being cagey about it, but saying that there should be some information about this soon. If you guys had to speculate, what kind of game do you think this is? Do you think this is like a straight up survival horror game? Do you think it's being developed by Nintendo, or what do you think is going on?
Well, can we just hit that Samus Hunter thing? Because I think, I don't know if I don't know how, I know Samus Hunter is not like, I don't know. I know they've gotten some things right and a lot of things wrong. Am I wrong about that? Like they're maybe not like, I mean, like your average leaker, right? But what they're saying makes it sound to me like it's Famicom Detective Club. If they're little vague hints, because they say that it has a series with 2 prequels on the Switch.
Yep.
And it's not a horror game, but suggestive themes and violence are part of the setting. And that sounds very much like Famicom Detective Club, because they're the 2 prequels. So I don't know if that's true or not. The vibes feel weird for Famicom Detective Club a little bit to me, at least in terms of the live action and stuff. But
I feel like, that was kind of when I read the Samus Hunter, that's kind of what my mind jumped to as well. I have not played Famicom Detective Club at all, but I've watched a bit of it, and having seen this, it could, the graphics being realistic feels like a visual novel-esque. And so I think, it could kind of delve into that territory, and using that kind of like framework of that game, you can kind of get a little bit darker or maybe make it more of a thriller. So that is honestly what my mind jumped to as well, Patrick.
Yeah, I don't know that they would straight up do like a survival horror thing. And if anything, this seems almost more kind of like crime, or like Seven, or like Long Legs, which I just saw the other day, which is kind of like less Hereditary, more Seven, So it's like, I mean, I could see some of that. And I think a lot of people would be pretty disappointed after they've like done this like spooky like hyping for it to be a visual novel game. But that would be pretty interesting. Maybe it'll be Switch Detective Club.
Yeah, otherwise I have no clue. Like, do y'all have other guesses or other things you've heard or speculate?
When I was looking at Samus Hunter's account, they already reposted someone's reply of aforementioned game that we think it is. So I think it's in the bag.
We'll see.
At least that's what they say. Yeah.
Yeah, unless they're just blowing hot air to get likes on Twitter.
In that case, never mind. I was like, what are 2 games that are sequential on the Switch that I can think of? And all I can think of is The World Ends With You. And it's not that, but it's fun to make stupid guesses.
Could be Donkey Kong Country Returns and Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. This could be the long-awaited.
It's an ape.
Are violence
Technically
and death themes in those games?
You'd be surprised.
Okay.
Yeah. You got to play the Game Boy ones.
Okay.
See the full story.
I'm ready to get educated on this episode.
Oh boy, well, we can move on. I'm sure we will at some point find out about this. It does sound like, again, if we believe Samus Hunter and some of these other people, we will know sooner than later. And I can't imagine they'll let us sit on that weirdness for too long without a little more info. But we'll move on to new NSO games joining the Nintendo Switch Online library. These are Game Boy Advance games. Before we get into the specifics, just seems like this stuff's coming at a more rapid clip lately. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. That's sort of one part of this discussion I'd be curious y'all's thoughts on. But then it is the Starfy games, or 3 GBA games. That's how you say it, right? Starfy?
Yeah, it's Densetsu no Starfy, or the legendary Starfy is what it translates to. Yes.
Yeah, and they're all in Japanese. These are games that have not been officially translated before, right? And they still aren't. I think even though they're coming to NSO, I think the text is still in Japanese. I don't know how important that is, but
honestly, I started playing these, and it's pretty fucking important. You know, I really don't get this drop. Like, it's like they're platformers, you know, and there's a lot of like movement, and you know, there's stuff that you can kind of brute force your way through. But like, I started playing. I downloaded a ROM hack, like the English ROM hack translation of the first game, and there's like so much text, and there's so much of the story and like what you're meant to do that's all conveyed through dialogue. And I'm like, I just don't understand why I saw someone post this online. It'd be like if Netflix dropped like a Japanese film, like a Kurosawa film with no subtitles or dub, you know, like on the service. Like, it's just weird, you know, that they would do this. I'm glad that we have it instead of not having it, but you know, and the game is really fun, by the way. I've been playing it on that SP that I have, and it's like definitely worth playing. But if you're going to play these, I would really recommend seek out the fan translations, because it's just a lot more fun to play when you actually know what's going on.
This is one of those weird instances there where like they gave it to us, but still pirated, I guess, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because that's like what they gave us is hard to play.
If you have Nintendo Switch Online and you're subscribed to the expansion pass, you should have zero ethical qualms about downloading the fan translation for this game, because you paid for it. You know, you're just, exactly.
What do y'all think though? Am I right? Does it feel like we're getting more drops and like more themed ones and stuff? Like,
it seems interesting. Like, I've noticed they kind of are dropping like whole franchises. It's just like really bizarre. And I think it's also interesting, like, as we move into just a more global internet connected society every day, to just see these games that are stuck in a region get exported out regardless of localization at all. So it is cool to have it, but yeah, I'm like with David. I played the one for the DS that came out, which might have been the first Starfy game to ever be localized in the US.
Yeah, but it is the 5th Starfy game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. It was a really fun game, and I was really stoked to play these. But then I was like, no, I remember having to read a good amount for that game. There's no way full Japanese text I'm going to be able to make it through this game. But it is cool to see them just like drop everything all at once. Interesting.
Yeah, I'd love to see that for more franchises that have been underrepresented, for sure.
Yeah.
You know, because there's a lot of like weird fringe Nintendo and like third-party games that are like tied to classic Nintendo systems that'd be great to just see them drop in mass.
Well, we'll move on to Xbox's service, subscription service, and that is Game Pass. So the news this week is that Xbox Game Pass is getting a price increase, as well as some changes to how it works and the tiers. And it's confusing to me, probably confusing to everybody. There's all these different names, and they've changed the names a few times, and they're changing some of them again and sunsetting some of these things. But I think the big takeaway is that the prices are going up, and also that the base one will not always have games at launch. I think those are two notable things that we should discuss.
And that's the base one being Game Pass. Was it standard? Not Game Pass Core. Because Game Pass Core never got the day one games.
Yeah.
But now it's like the tier above that is also not getting the day one games. I don't know. I started looking at this and then I just closed my laptop. I was like, It just started hurting my brain too much. I'm like, I'm just gonna let my subscription lapse when it's over,
So I think that they're seeing. I mean, I don't know how people are going to react to this. Obviously we're a Nintendo podcast, and while some of us, own and play on Xbox, I'd be curious, if this, like, David, you're going to let yours lapse, but I know there's already a lot of that sentiment already, that was kind of going around with some of Microsoft's choices of closing studios and such, but yeah, it's confusing because of all the tiers. Because then, like, there's PC Game Pass, which is also going up in price, and then the core and the standard and the yada yada. But what do we think about this? About especially the day one stuff being pushed to a higher tier, and just price increase in general? Is this them just trying to squeeze more money? Is this them seeing that their model isn't working long term, or?
The price increase just makes sense. Like, I feel like the lower price was to just entice people, and then once you forget that you're subscribed, you're accidentally subscribed for your entire life, So the price increase just makes sense. I thought another weird part of this was that you can only stack the Game Pass console up to 13 months, which I don't know if that's going to apply to every tier. And that's where this also just gets really confusing. Like, it's too many tiers. Like, make it simple.
So my exact reaction to that too. Like, we had a household discussion about this because I was like, "Hey, the price of this is going up," because we all use the Xbox, and that was part of why I ended up getting Game Pass Ultimate, because I wanted everybody to have access to the games on the Xbox, as opposed to just paying for the PC version like I had started out with, and I said it, part of that discussion was me saying, I feel like Xbox's model entirely, like, just historically, because just the Xbox naming has been confusing. That's part of why I've just avoided Xbox for so long, is it's almost like it's confusing on purpose to get you to pay for the most expensive thing. So that way you just don't worry about what tier you're on. That's what I feel like. And I think I'm going to fall for it because I like having the service. There's lots of games like it's like my version of GameFly, I guess, right? Because there's lots of games that I would love to try and have tried. And I'm like, I'm glad I didn't buy this game, and I'm glad I got to try it. There are tons of things that I play that I'll talk about later on this episode that I'm like, I'm so grateful that I have the service, but like, it does feel predatory. Like, I am part of the, like, I can acknowledge that, right? Like, so we're probably going to cancel Disney Plus because, like, fuck that. That's the, like, give and take here, right? Is like lesser of two evils. I don't know.
That's funny you mentioned that, because I'm in the same position with Disney Plus. Like, they raised their price, and I'm on this like annual plan, and I don't ever watch Disney Plus, but I have so many people that use my Disney Plus account that I would feel way too bad about that, because I know they all use it all the time, and it's a lot of people that I use their accounts and shit like that. So it's like, basically I've just got suckered into like buying a whole other year of Disney Plus. But all of that to say, hit me up if you want the password,
because you don't even watch it.
Well,
at least I use it.
Well, that's another thing I was going to say, is that, like, for me, it's like I've found with my gaming habits that I don't use my Xbox Game Pass account. I just don't use it, and I've been paying for it, and I thought I would really get, I was enticed by the deal, and it is a deal if you do use it, right? But I think I'm just at the point now where $20 a month stacks up to the price of like 3 AAA games a year, and I haven't played 3 Xbox AAA games since I've had it per year, so it's just like really not worth it for me. I think I'm just going to go back to just buying games digitally on sale on Xbox if I ever want to play these games, and I think a lot of people will too. But, at the end of the day, this is just what happens when Xbox and Microsoft have just been accruing assets for their shit, like we talk about those write-offs for WB, they're getting rid of assets so they can pay less taxes. Like, Microsoft's assets are now super huge, and they've spent so much money on them. They're going to have to recoup that cost somewhere. And so, I think raising the price of an every single month payment that they get from their subscribers is definitely the best way to do it. So this was inevitable, and we're just now seeing it.
We'll move along back to Nintendo. We're going to be talking about the summer magazine that Nintendo has been putting out the last couple years, I think. this is digital only in English at least, but they put out an English version, and there's a digital thing you can thumb through, leaf through, whatever you want to call it, click through. It's fun, I guess. There's a focus on Luigi and Luigi's Mansion. And then, some of the recent games, like little things that I don't think we get in America. Like at the end, they have like, things that are for sale. And you're like, damn, there's a lot of interesting Pikmin toys that there's no way I can get my hands on.
Don't worry, I'll pick them up when I'm in Japan, Patrick. Just
there we go.
Give me a shopping list.
I don't know. It's kind of fun to look through. And of note this time, unless there's, other things y'all want to mention, is they did a quote unquote interview, which is fake, but
it's real to me.
Yeah, chill out, Patrick. Don't say shit like
oh my
that on the
god, you're a
podcast.
Splatoon fan. You should buy into this stuff. Like,
all right,
you're not in it for the idols. You're a fake fan.
That's true. I'm a fake fan. The Splatoon 3 or just a Splatoon interview with the 3 idol groups from the 3 different games. So the Squid Sisters, Off the Hook, and Deep Cut. It's as if they all sat down on a big couch and had this interview.
They
did sit down.
Sorry.
On a real couch. Patrick, it's a round table discussion.
I think we're done talking about this.
They talked about, they talked about like doing a big collab, and I'm really excited for what music they're going to continue to put out, because as somebody who learned, as we'll continue to talk about, some of the playing of Splatoon has been a little, I don't know. We'll talk about it. I'm still very invested in the like lore and like world building of it. So
me too.
I love all this kind of stuff, and I've loved all of the concerts, and I love all the music that they put out, and I love treating like the idols like they're idols, and so I eat this kind of stuff up. Check out the interview; it's fun.
Yeah, it's a super group. It'll be the traveling Wilburys of the Splatoon universe. Very excited to see that. And Patrick, if they're not real, then how do they do real life concerts with real life people in them?
Good.
Yeah.
That's my question.
Boom.
Yeah.
Well,
mic drop.
Since they did this, do we think there's any game implications for this? I know some people in our Discord were saying maybe this will be maybe the final Splatfest of Splatoon 3, or the final supported Splatfest.
That would make sense with 3 teams to pick from. That would get really heated.
Oh my god!
And what would that mean for the future of Splatoon 4?
Right. Or does this have any tie-in to Splatoon 4 where they're all going to be in it or something? Or is it a 4th group? Who knows?
Splatoon 4, the idols will just be John, Paul, George, and Ringo.
Or do they have to have 4 idols in that game? Like, so like 1 from each of these groups, and then 2 from one.
Let's move on.
So anyway, you can check out that summer magazine if you haven't already. It's pretty cool. And while we're talking about Splatoon, there was a Splatfest this past weekend. I actually did not play in it, but this was the where would you spend a day if it was empty? Everybody's favorite question: a palace, the beach, or an amusement park. And beach won, and we all chose palace. Though I actually didn't end up playing. And it seems like palace was the wrong pick.
Yeah, it looks like it got the least amount of points, but I played a little bit of this Splatfest. I played like one day with Ty Typos. Shout out Ty. And I think I played like 9 matches, and I lost every single one in a row. So you guys can blame me for our loss.
You can blame me too. I also played a few matches on Saturday night, and I think it's like the least amount of fun I've ever had playing Splatoon. I got so discouraged.
This kind of happens in online games with really rabid fan bases, is that like a lot of the casuals, not that we're casuals, but a lot of the people that play it, more for fun and not hardcore are, weighing off of it over the course of the game. And the people that are left are like the people that are really, really good at it, and that's kind of where we're at. And I was feeling like a little down on it as well. And I was like, man, I only really play Splatfest anymore. I'm not getting the most out of Splatoon. But I looked at my playtime. I've got like 250 hours in the game. I've gotten my money's worth. I definitely enjoyed my time with Splatoon 3. It is okay if I don't like have the same love for it that I did whenever it first came out. And whenever Splatoon 4 comes out, I'm going to go through this whole thing all over again because, like you said, Summer, the most fun part of this game for me is the world. It's the aesthetics. It's everything that they pack into it, and then that addictive gameplay loop is like the icing on the cake, right?
Mhm.
So I think I do not mourn the end of my time with this game. I've had a blast with it while it lasted.
Yeah, that 2-year support is about right.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like,
Totally.
I have kind of finally, I think, knock on wood, broken my Splatoon addiction. Part of the reason I did not play this Splatfest was because I was like, I don't want to even dip my toe back in and then find myself back into it. I want to play other games, and that's where I'm at. So sorry, this isn't about me.
This has been about Splatoon for the past 7.5 minutes.
We'll move on.
Much to Borden's chagrin.
Yeah, I just completely checked out about 30 seconds in.
Well, we can move on to a couple more news items here. One of which is a game developer article that came out this week about an issue that I think has kind of been talked about, and maybe we've even talked about on this show. But there was a new sort of, investigative work about Nintendo's failure to credit translators who work on big games. And I think of note, one of the games that they sort of focus on is like Tears of the Kingdom, The Legend of Zelda, as well as a couple other big games, but where basically the people who do the translation work don't get named in the credits. Maybe their company does, and maybe it doesn't, even sometimes. That's a bummer. And I think Nintendo's a big enough company, and it's I would like to think it's an easy enough thing where I don't know how much of this is Nintendo and how much of this is the translation companies they work with and that sort of thing, but you'd like to think that, especially with this kind of discussion, they'll get credits, because credits are a big part of how you get jobs in games, and saying you worked on a game and pointing to it and that sort of thing. So
I feel like this, is one reason that I don't hear a lot of come up, but this is a great push for unionization in video games, because the same thing happened in film where people wouldn't get credited, but once you're in a union, you are legally required to credit these people. These studios were required to credit people. So, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that like they really need to be pushing for that kind of stuff, because otherwise they're going to get left out. And you're right, that is how you get jobs. Like every job I have to apply for, like they want to see your IMDb or your resume, and your resume, they'll check your references to make sure like you actually worked on these shows. But yeah, dude, like those credits are super important for helping your career for sure.
Totally. Yeah. And you're right. Movies don't have this problem really anymore. You go and see the, a big Marvel movie or something, and it's just, there's a million names on screen at once. You got to really look for it, but it's there, and it's like, even if they're working with like 20, 30 different effects studios, every single person that worked on the movie is listed, right? I think they've even started listing out all the instrument players of like orchestras that record scores for movies too. I saw one recently that did that. So I think that that's a really good example to follow, and there's really no excuse for this. Like you said, this might not be Nintendo doing it, although I think it probably is. It kind of reeks to me like something like, well, we've always done it this way, let's just keep doing it this way, but that doesn't have to be the case. I kind of roll my eyes whenever people in creative fields are like, well, this is the precedent. And it's like, well, you can always just do things better. You don't have to do it like that because it's always been done that way, right? So hopefully this is something that gets changed. And yeah, if it takes unionization in order to get this happen, then fuck yeah, let's do it.
we have one more news item, which is sort of a small one, just to lead us into our main topic today, which is focused on Donkey Kong in particular, that there are some new Nintendo toys coming to the McDonald's in Japan, at least, related to the theme park over there. And of note, there is a cute little Donkey Kong in a minecart that you can launch. I don't think these will be stateside because they really do seem to be about the theme park, right?
I know it's not going to be stateside because there is a Jaws toy and there is no Jaws ride at Universal Studios in the US anymore. So this is very specifically a Japan only release.
The theme park expert has spoken.
Not the Disney adult.
Theme park specific, yes.
This is exciting because as far as we're all aware, the Donkey Kong ride and the whole Donkey Kong section of Nintendo World should be opening up this fall at the Osaka location of Super Nintendo World. So just them putting the toy out right now is hopefully further proof of that. There's really no way of knowing. I mean, sometimes there are contracts with things, even when stuff gets pushed back. I'm trying to think of an example recently, but there was some toy that came out for a game that got pushed back like multiple years. Yeah, for McDonald's stuff. But either way, this is exciting, and I'm really hoping that by the time I go to Japan, that the Donkey Kong Country section of the park will be open. That and the Nintendo Museum in Kyoto are both supposed to be opening around the same time this year. So hoping to be able to make it out to both of those.
Well, that's going to do it for our news roundup this week. We are going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to be working out our rankings for the Donkey Kong Country franchise. All right, we are back, and this week we are ranking all of the Donkey Kong Country games. That's right, all 5 of them. So the Donkey Kong Country franchise has been around now for about 30 years, almost exactly. So yeah, back in 1994 on the Super Nintendo, Donkey Kong Country with this kind of crazy visual style, and it kind of...
I call the visual style SGI Workstation Core.
Okay.
All my friends who used to work in animated films back in the 90s, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Come on.
I am not one of them.
Yeah,
I don't know. I have a real love for this franchise. I played the first one when it came out on Super Nintendo, and while I did miss a lot of the in-betweens until recently, I had a real homecoming with Tropical Freeze personally, and just big Donkey Kong Country fan, and have gone back and played all of these except for one, which I have played a little bit of. So that's my blind spot. But I don't know. Just love this franchise. What y'all have any thoughts about the franchise as a whole, or your experience with it you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, Donkey Kong Country is definitely one of my favorite video game franchises of all time. I loved these games when I was a kid. I find them to be some of the most replayable video games ever. I go back and replay them often, all different sorts of versions of these games. Some I'll play them on NSO, so I had that rewind feature. I'll go back and play the originals, so I can play them like on a 4x3 screen. And recently I've been enjoying going back to like the Game Boy Advance versions of these games as well, which have some really cool ports of them for the Game Boy Advance. A lot of them are like really washed out color-wise because of like the GBA's like dim screen. But recently there have been like fan color restorations where they like take the color palettes and match them to like the Super Nintendo versions. And so I've been getting into a lot of fan ROM hacks in general recently. But that's been something I'm enjoying recently. Yeah, and like you said, the new games as well. Once it went from Rare to Retro Studios, which I've always felt like are, you know, cyclically and emotionally linked. These studios, I feel like they're very similar in a lot of ways, at least from my perspective. Both Western Nintendo studios, right? They both start with R. There's a whole lot of things that we could really talk about here. But, you know, I think those have been excellent as well, you know, and they've really passed the torch forward. I think it's worth noting, too, that, you know, obviously Donkey Kong Country itself is an offshoot franchise from previous Donkey Kong games, you know, like it was kind of like a mid-90s like renaissance, you know, for the franchise, and it kind of totally revitalized it, right? So, and then obviously that spun out into other things like Mario and Donkey Kong and everything like that. We won't necessarily be covering those games because those kind of feel almost more in line with the original arcade games, right?
The model for Donkey Kong, right? Like just thinking about like the Super Nintendo and like playing Mario Kart, and you play like, who the heck is this guy? That's the old Donkey Kong, right? And then once Donkey Kong Country games came out and kind of that's this sort of new model of Donkey Kong is taken over. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I started playing with the GBA ports, actually. I did not have a Super Nintendo of my own, so I played a little bit of it at like friends' houses and stuff. But once the Donkey Kong Country came out for GBA, I was like, I got it immediately because I had to know like what the fuss was about. And I really enjoyed it as like an alternative to the Mario style of platforming. And it's interesting to see them have two different styles of platformer. And this one is definitely harder, even though there are hard Mario levels. I feel like this one just feels a little bit more, not frame perfect, but it's a little less forgiving in it. So I really enjoyed that about the franchise. So on GBA, I played 1 and 2. And then I never played 3 until we were going to do this episode. And then, and then I completely skipped Donkey Kong Country Returns, which is insane, until it came to the 3DS. And then I played through it all the way on the 3DS. And again, also insane. Never played Tropical Freeze. And then about 2 weeks ago, right before the last episode, I just got a wild hair. And I was like, you know what? Let's see what this is about. And yeah, but anyway, love the franchise as just like a almost competitor to Mario, but not even really, because they just feel so different. And also just proves like 2 coexisting platforming franchises can exist within the same platform.
But not Kirby.
No, we don't really talk about Kirby
or Yoshi.
Shit.
I think there's like a whole other discussion about like Nintendo's platformers and like where they fall in terms of difficulty and fun and all that. But like we have to set that probably aside.
No, but you're right. I mean, Donkey Kong definitely is like more for the people that crave difficulty, right? It's nice to have that.
Summer, what's your experience with
Are you
Donkey
saying
Kong
that I
Country?
don't like difficult games? So I'm looking forward to being educated on this episode because my Donkey Kong experience is exclusive to Donkey Kong, not Donkey Kong Country. And I believe that the one and only time that I started to try to play Donkey Kong Country, I was doing a charity stream. This had to have been this was like 2 years ago. And I was going to try to play Mario Party. And while I was waiting for people to come play with me, David tuned in and said, but what if you played Donkey Kong Country? And I was like, yeah, okay. I've never played that before. And he was like, what? And then I never tried to play it again. So I am ready to help rank games that I've definitely played. I definitely know things about these games. Can't wait to take in everything that you have to say. And
it's okay.
Based on your arguments, maybe do some tiebreakers.
Yeah, and hopefully after this you'll feel emboldened to check out some of the games in the order that which we rank them.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, so we're going to focus on just the 5 mainline Donkey Kong Country games. I think when we were talking about this episode, there's definitely a question of do we rank Donkey Kong games? Do we rank Donkey Kong Country games? Where is the line? There's a lot of Donkey Kong spin-off games of all different sorts and types, actually. But there are some that are arguably more related to Donkey Kong Country. In particular, the Donkey Kong Land games, which I have 0 experience with. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons we're not talking about them.
Yeah, I mean, these are unique games. They are not like ports. There are Game Boy Color. There's a Game Boy Color port of the original Donkey Kong Country, and then, like I said, there are the GBA ports of the SNES games. The Donkey Kong Land games for the original Game Boy are unique games. They're pretty limited. They did the pre-rendered thing, but it's the Game Boy, so it's like amazing that it works at all on that system. But it does have its fair share of limitations because of that. Mainly, the sprites are very large for the characters, and it's kind of like the same problem with like Super Mario Brothers DX for the Game Boy Color. You have to like scroll the screen higher up because they wanted to keep everything pixel perfect for that platform. But they are really interesting games, and there's a lot of really cool stuff in them. I started playing at least a little bit of each of these leading up to this just to kind of see what they're like. And they're all pretty good. And definitely by the time you get to Donkey Kong Land 3, which does feature Dixie and Kiddy Kong, they really started to nail down building a Donkey Kong Country game for this form factor, right? And so I think the farther you go on that one, just for technical reasons, the better they get in that franchise. But we definitely had to give them a little bit of lip service, even if we won't be ranking them today.
There's also Donkey Kong 64, which is a 3D platformer and more of a collectathon, but you could argue is in the same vein. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think you can actually, but it feels related enough. We have to give it some lip service.
Yeah, it doesn't have country in the name, so it's not Donkey Kong Country 64. It's Donkey Kong 64. Very different.
Yeah, it's definitely much more in the style of like Banjo-Kazooie. Also, a much maligned game. A lot of people think that this game is not very good. This was rare at their most collectathon-y. There's so much shit to collect. There's so many different colored bananas that you have to pick up, and you have to have a certain number of each color to open up different things, and it really becomes a hodgepodge of confusing confusing mess. I have a soft spot for this game. I really enjoyed it when I was a kid, but certainly it's kind of its own thing, and we won't be including it in this list either. But definitely worth playing and worth shouting out.
I also think we should mention the DK games, like King of Swing and Juggle Climber, which look kind of similar but aren't. I don't know. They're like you move. Anyway, they.
What about Donkey Konga?
Yeah, I don't know.
I played that one.
Where does the line stop?
I wouldn't even include this in the honorable mentions if it was me. I'm not saying that we shouldn't mention them, and they're already mentioned, so I'm not going to like cut it out or anything. But it's like these are not games that are made by Rare. I think that the Land games were made by the same team, or at least like a B team at the studio. Donkey Kong 64 was also made by Rare. And so it's like, for me, it's like these are like Nintendo being like, okay, let's,
capitalize on this success.
Exactly. And there was a while where Donkey Kong was used just as a mascot to sell peripherals or to try new gameplay styles. It's like they were like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do one for the DS where you spin him around and he has to swing to something, or Donkey Konga, with the drums and everything like that, right? So there's interesting stuff in there, and I don't think that they're bad games, but I certainly wouldn't rank them among the Donkey Kong Country franchise.
Well, we have one more on this list, David. Why should we include this one?
Yeah, I think the last honorable mention that we should talk about before we get into the ranking is Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair. Now, this obviously doesn't have Donkey Kong anywhere in
country.
It's not even country. It's not even Yooka-Laylee Country, which would have been a really cheeky title if they had done that. But basically, obviously, there is Platonic Games, which is made up of a lot of ex-Rare people. When Microsoft bought Rare, a bunch of them left the company, and a lot of them made this indie studio called Platonic Games. They made the first Yooka-Laylee, which was a Banjo-Kazooie style collectathon, like a 3D platformer. And then the follow-up to that game was a 2D game starring Yooka-Laylee as well, which essentially is a spiritual successor to the Donkey Kong Country franchise, and is a really great game. Plays almost exactly like it, with the difference being there's like this kind of weird overworld area as well, which I'm not as huge of a fan of, but it's cool that they tried something new. But definitely deserves a shout out, being that most of the original team that made the original Donkey Kong Country games ended up working on this game as well.
All right. Well, with all of those caveats and discussion of the games we're not going to be talking about, I think it's time for us to talk about the actual Donkey Kong Country games. So we're going to start off with sort of our baseline game, which is the original Donkey Kong Country. As we talked about, came out in 1994. Rare made this game, and it just like kind of whole cloth created this whole world, like where, all these new characters that are now iconic, like Diddy Kong and King K. Rool, and reimagined the visual for Donkey Kong and the way that stuck. Am I right? Like all those things are new, right? Like the Kremlings, there's nothing that there were kind of like alligator-y characters in some old Donkey Kong games, maybe, that they took inspiration from, or am I?
I kind of feel like the most that this game harkens back to the original Donkey Kong is in the opening cinematic, right? It's like, it starts with like Cranky and like cranking this like old thing on like a girder, and it's like, is that the right word? Girder? Is that a steel beam? I think I said that right, like a truss. And then, he immediately gets knocked off by like the modern Donkey Kong, and then it like shows up in a jungle, and it's like, we're doing something new now, So there was definitely like them being like, this is now a brand new game. Mario's nowhere to be seen. This is all about Donkey Kong and his world. And I loved that at the time. And I think the visuals being what they were at the time was absolutely mind blowing. And I think that Shigeru Miyamoto was really sour on this game before it came out, before he actually played it, because he kept, he was very protective of Mario and his like platforming like status like within Nintendo. And I think, kind of badmouthed this game, being like, well, it's not, it might be pretty, but it's, it's not like it's like the best platformer ever. And then he actually played the game and was like, I'm so sorry. I take back everything I said. This game rules. And so it was nice to see some of that revisionist history from Miyamoto after it had come out. But
well, yeah, and I think what's striking about Donkey Kong Country and the way it plays compared to other platformers is Donkey Kong is a little heavy,
yeah,
and has this sort of momentum. And I this is true of all of the games actually, but you really feel it for the first time there, where there's just, when you're really in the groove, you're kind of flying through the levels. There is a route, right? Like, there's a route to kind of just like optimize playing them. And sometimes you hit on that and it just feels really good. And that's not always the case in Mario or other platformers.
I feel like because of that, this game sometimes almost feels like Sonic. Because you get this momentum and you're bouncing, and it's like if you are timing your bounces perfectly, you just bounce from one enemy to the next and the next and the next, and you just kind of keep rolling, and then suddenly you're at the end of the level and you're like, I don't know exactly how I did that, but damn, I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it does have kind of like different levels as well. Sometimes you'll be like up in the treetops or going across vines, or you're on the bottom level, avoiding enemies that maybe you can't roll through, or you can only kill with a certain kind of Kong, right? I think that's another thing that this game did really well that Sonic also did. Like, with Tails and Sonic, there's Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong, and they both kind of have different advantages to each person. Diddy has a much better roll, but Donkey Kong is stronger and can take out bigger enemies. And so there's a lot of really interesting stuff as far as that's concerned. But this certainly was, I think it was a huge, humongous game when it came out. I think it was a bigger hit. I mean, Nintendo was hoping that it would be a huge hit. I think it was a bigger hit than even they were expecting when it came out, and really resonated, especially with a Western audience.
Something that's in all the games to a certain extent that I think, there's a dividing line a little bit between the new ones and the old ones, is all the animals that you play as. And this game introduces that concept, obviously. But man, I love the levels or the parts of levels where you get to play as the different animals, and it's different in the different games. But, I'm kind of curious what y'all think about the different ones for each game. But, the first game has the marlin. Is that what it is? Is it a marlin? The
swordfish.
The swordfish. Yeah, that's probably what it is. The frog and the ostrich, the bird, and the rhino. Obviously.
Yeah, definitely. I don't have all of them memorized either, but we have Rambi the rhinoceros, Engard the swordfish, Winky the frog, Espresso the ostrich, and Squawks the parrot.
Yeah. So in terms of rankings, we're just starting off. So we're going to put Donkey Kong Country as our sort of baseline. Unless there's anything else anybody wants to mention about this specific game, we can move on to the second one, the sequel, which came out the next year. These came out in a rapid clip, which is its own thing to discuss. Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest, which I have a really hard time with and is meant to be a sort of play on words, but fucks me up every time.
I mean, everyone always said Diddy's Kong. Wait.
Yep, Diddy's Kong.
Everyone always said Diddy Kong's Quest. But yes, it is Diddy's Kong Quest. This is the start of just many, many puns in this franchise.
So in this one of the big differences is you don't play as Donkey Kong, right? Of just kind of funny. Diddy obviously gets the title, but we introduce now Dixie Kong, best Kong, in my opinion. I think it also kind of easier to play as. Dixie Kong has abilities. So in this game, you don't even play as Donkey Kong, but you're rescuing Donkey Kong. So you get to play as Diddy and Dixie. What else is unique about this one? There's some different kinds of platforming a little bit at times. Like you said, Squawks has a bigger role. This is where that kind of is different. There's some levels based around that. And
I would say from a level design perspective, there's a lot more verticality. There's a lot of levels that go straight up, with kind of thinner, width, and it's just totally vertically oriented. You see a lot of that early in the game too. Like right off the bat, it's kind of got like a pirate theme, and there's a stage where you're just going up these like masts.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Yeah, as you're going up, right? And it kind of like ends up at the top, and then kind of the end of the boss battle is up in the crow's nest, and you fight this crow in the first world of the game. And so that's another great thing about this game too, is that, and honestly, this whole series from the originals all the way to the new ones, is that they really work the overworld and the themes of where they are into the levels and how they all kind of flow together. I think that's something that was actually vastly expanded on in the Returns franchise from Retro. But, this is just a masterclass in like game feel, movement, and level design. You know, I think that this game is seen as kind of an all-time classic, and has this wonderful blend of being really approachable in the beginning levels, and by the end becoming so ridiculously hard, but not in a way that ever feels unfair. It's like you really earn that difficulty as you go. And like you said, Patrick, Dixie is just such an amazing addition to this game. I love I didn't think I was going to be making multiple comparisons to Sonic the Hedgehog in this episode, but you know, Tails and Dixie are very similar characters with the kind of like hover mechanic, right? And I love any game that has sort of like a floating or hovering mechanic. Aladdin for the Super Nintendo being another one, when you have the kind of like a paraglider sort of situation. You know, I love that kind of stuff in games, and I think that that really adds a bunch to this as well, and only even further changes how you approach levels with the different characters that you pick. This is definitely one of my favorite games of all time.
Yeah, I really like this one too. The probably has my favorite overworld out of the original 3 Donkey Kong Country games, and my favorite is Crazy Crimland. Just like the theme park, the amusement park of the Crims was just too cool. Like just the whole theming, and then you get this like on the cart level, you get the skull cart that you're riding on top of, which is just sick. It looks so cool. But yeah, this is just like an improvement on the first one, in my opinion. Like it just kind of you could tell they learned the tools with the first one, and then by the time they got to the second one, they were like, "Oh no, we're really good at this, and like let's go all out." Like dude, this game is incredible. Yeah.
Well, you just said it's an improvement on the first one, so is that? I feel like that's a clear vote that you think it's better. I think I might agree. David, would you think rank this higher than the original one?
I absolutely would. Keeping the Sonic comparisons going, this is the Sonic 2, the original Sonic the Hedgehog. You know, like this game truly is an improvement in almost every way, even down to the music, which we haven't mentioned from the first game either. But the entire Donkey Kong Country franchise has some of the best original soundtracks from any video game.
Totally.
And this one, you know, where the first game had some different writing duties, this second game was composed entirely by David Wise, who composed some of the most iconic songs from the franchise. So on that alone, I would put it above. But for every other reason, yes, I would rank this above the original Donkey Kong Country.
Nice. Well, I think we all agree there. So that brings us along to the third entry, which is Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble. 1996. So these were back to back. So in this game, obviously Dixie Kong gets the name, and so you play as Dixie Kong, but you also play as Kiddy Kong, who is the partner in this game. I don't really love Kiddy Kong, but I'll save that for maybe when we discuss this a little bit more. I don't hate Kiddy Kong either, but this one's a little different in a couple of ways. Like there's a more loose overworld. The level design is also very vertical, but also kind of puzzly oriented.
Yeah.
And sometimes you backtrack and things like that. Yeah. What do y'all, any thoughts or big picture from y'all on this?
I'll go first because you said the puzzly aspect. And to me, this game like a little bit lost the plot of like what makes a good Donkey Kong Country game. And we're talking about like the momentum and the movement in the levels and just being able to just kind of like fly through levels. This game just makes you stop and like explore the space, but you don't have any sort of map reference. So sometimes I was just getting really confused walking around trying to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to be doing in the levels. And to me, made the game like not as immediately fun as 1 and 2 were. So, and then the overworld as well, I had the same problem where I'm like, in the first 2, I'm like, I'm guided. I'm going from level to level. I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And this one, I'm like, okay, I got in a boat. Now where do I go? Now I got in a hover boat, but now I can go more places. It took me a while to even just find the levels to play the game.
He's got to go talk to Funky Kong, baby. He's there. He'll guide you.
I don't know, man.
I'm with Jordan on all of those criticisms. I think once you kind of find that rhythm of the game, it's helpful, but it can be a little frustrating until you find it. Mm-hmm. And it does feel different than the other ones, but same at the same time. It's an interesting diversion, if you will, like from the path of the first 2, but I don't know that it always worked for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like this is where we'll diverge, right? I think we've been all together on this up to this point, but I love this game, and I know this game is much maligned, and a lot of people really think that this is the worst in the series, and it might be by the end of this ranking. We'll have to see, but I love this game so much, and I think that a lot of the stuff that you guys have issues with, I see as just more stuff layered on top of what we already had. I think the overworld puzzles I actually really enjoy. I like having to go get a patch and then patching up a inflatable hovercraft that then can access more areas of the map that you couldn't before, right? And all the little the banana bird or whatever, like those caves that you open up and you do this kind of little mini game. Like I love all that stuff, right? I think it can get a little overwhelming. I think there's a lot more collectibles to collect in this one. Donkey Kong Country 2 had the addition of like DK coins and kind of this whole like extra bonus world that we didn't really touch on. There's that in this game, plus even more stuff. More isn't always better, but to me, I feel like they didn't take away what was working from the other games. It's just there's this additional shit you can do if you want, right? There's also some interesting lore implications to this game. They add the bears into this. There's like a whole area with a bunch of bears that have been at war with the Kremlins for a really long time. And there's a lot more text in this game than any of the other Super Nintendo ones. The last one's kind of just like did a lot without saying much. This game really spells a lot out for you in some really interesting ways. And also Wrinkly Kong is in this game, but she's dead? No, she's not dead.
She's sleeping.
She's sleeping. Yeah. She's like about to die. She's very old.
Maybe nap she's been taking there every time I go in to save.
But I love this game so much. I think a lot of people really took umbrage with Kiddy Kong as well. They thought that it was kind of like a little too like silly and kiddie, and and you're this age, you just want to be like kind of cool, and playing as a baby is not very fun. And he's like slower, so I get why people didn't like him. But to me, this is kind of the best of both worlds. This is like a game where basically you can play as Donkey Kong and Dixie Kong. You've got your big heavy Kong and your lighter Kong, which in Donkey Kong Country 2 they were both pretty light. So I love that about this game.
Yeah, I just to focus on Kiddy Kong for 1 second is like I want to dislike Kiddy Kong, but I actually enjoy playing as Kiddy Kong. And so it's like the aesthetic of Kiddy Kong. I don't like hate it. It's just like I would rather play as Dixie, but then sometimes I just find myself playing as Kiddy Kong, and I'm like, oh, I guess it just feels good, So I feel both. I feel very much both ways about this game in general, because all the things you say about it, I kind of agree with, but I also like it's a little obtuse. Like I go into these bear rooms and they talk at me, and then my character just walks out, and I'm like, wait, what?
Like for those parts, I remember Summer had mentioned previously about like needing booklets for some of these games, and this out of all of them is the one where I was like, I wish I had the book for this game, because there's even like the Elephant Ellie. You're supposed to be like sucking up water, and I did not know how to do that. I could not figure out how to do it. I had to Google it, and I was like, man, if I had the booklet, I probably could figure this out. Probably mentioned about the bears in the booklet about you're supposed to be collecting something for them. All these things that I was like, dude, this is like one of those reasons I was like, I wish Nintendo would just put the books on NSO with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't want to harp too much on the criticisms, but yeah, there is a lot to like, but I'll go ahead and put it ranking. I think so. Do we think it's better or worse than Donkey Kong Country? I think it's worse than Donkey Kong Country.
Okay. We're not even going to do a softball. Like, is it better or worse than Donkey Kong Country 2?
Oh, sorry. Okay. I did it reversed.
No, I think, when there's only 2 on the board, it's kind of,
yeah.
Man.
I'm going to make you be the deciding factor here, Patrick, because I'm going to say it is better than the original Donkey Kong Country. I love the original Donkey Kong Country. I think it's an absolute classic, but I find myself going back to play Donkey Kong Country 3 more.
Yeah, I was going to say it should slot in between the two. So I think that's probably where the vote will land with 2v1. But we'll see. But yeah, this is tough.
We'll see. It's your turn.
Well, I agree, but could it go higher? I don't know. But like Man, it's tough to say it's better than Donkey Kong Country because it's such a classic. It's kind of like when you say a game's better than Super Mario Bros. It's like, oh, I don't feel good about it, but I kind of think it might be.
Well, it's also like Donkey Kong Country is not like the original Super Mario Brothers in that like it is very, very good and holds on its own.
Yeah.
I mean, the original Mario Brothers is too, but it's like, this is like a different level, I think, you know? Like, I think it is, yeah, I understand your hesitation.
I feel good putting it above Donkey Kong Country 1.
Wow.
But man, I do think some of
we just upset a lot of people with that, Patrick, I think. Yeah.
I think that some of my problems
welcome to the heel side, baby. Yeah.
I think some of my problems with it would prevent me from saying it's better than the second game, though. What Jordan, we obviously know since you wouldn't even put it in front of the first, you wouldn't want to put it above the second one, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I think 2 still holds the crown right now in the ranking.
Okay, so right now we have it go 2, 3, 1. Well, so this is where there's a big jump. So we go from 1996 to 2010. Obviously, you know, Rare is no longer with Nintendo, and 15-ish years later, the franchise is revived on the Wii in the form of Donkey Kong Country Returns. The art style is different. You know, it's similar but more modern. I don't know, you know, not less pixel, and so on and so forth. And there are some design differences, right, in these latter games as well. Even if they hold the heart of this franchise, they are a little bit different and in some different ways. How would you articulate?
Well, I mean, first of all, they're entirely 3D rendered. There's no pre-rendered graphics at all here, right? You know, like I think the previous games being on systems that were 2D pixel systems for the most part relied on that SGI graphics style, right? Of that pre-rendered stuff that were then turned into sprites, right? So you have a whole world here that's made on the Wii that is fully fleshed out. But with that, I would say like the kind of aesthetics of it kind of softened a little bit. Here, you know, you can definitely see a little bit of the influence of those Nintendo years. Some of those games that we talked about before, like the King of Swing, Donkey Konga, stuff like that. Some of those like design elements that they brought in kind of de-edged, I think, the Rare designs for these games and these characters a little bit. And then on top of that, you know, you don't have the Kremlings anymore. And that's a huge part of this, is that you now have this new brand of enemies, these like tiki enemies, right? Which are kind of interesting, but certainly don't have a lot of the characterization and the interesting attributes that I think the Kremlings brought as bad guys, right? So you know, I don't think I could probably even tell you who the big bad is of this game. You know, like King K. Rool for the first 3 games was such an established bad guy, and it's like, in Donkey Kong Country Returns, it's like, yeah, there's like a tiki guy, but it's not like I know what his name is. He doesn't really have a personality, you know? So I think that's kind of like one of the negative factors of this game. Is that kind of what you were getting at, Patrick?
Yeah, and it is like level design stuff. I think there are vertical sections in the more modern 2 the 2 most modern ones. But I feel like it's more linear, especially than Donkey Kong Country 3. But there's just a slight difference in terms of design. And I think also, like you said, the enemy types. And there's a few new things, too, that kind of come in both of these games that I think are cool. But
like what?
Well, like this. So I'll just first of all say Returns is my biggest blind spot. We have it on our 3DS, but I got our 3DS after we got our Switch, and I keep thinking I'll play it. And then now with this new announcement, I'm like, I'm just gonna wait for it to come to Switch. I kept thinking I'd play like play it on Steam Deck or something, but I'm kind of just waiting. So I've played a little bit of it on 3DS. So I feel like I can't speak 100% to Returns, but like are there silhouette levels in Returns?
Yeah, that's where they started.
There were, yeah.
Like my buddy Matt Manchester is the person who designed those silhouette levels.
Oh, they're awesome. That's great. That's cool.
That's another plus of this game, is that it was designed right here in Austin, Texas, baby.
Yay.
Yeah.
Sure.
The animals are different. You don't play as the animals, right? You can ride on an animal.
That was always the case. Yeah. You always rode on the difference in this one is that there's only Rambi.
Yeah, you only ride on Rambi. You don't get to play as the swordfish or things like that. And I kind of miss that.
Yeah. Did you play as them you kind of rode them in all the old games as well?
No, but in Diddy's Kong Diddy's Kong Quest.
Diddy's Kong.
There's the barrels that are the animals, and you just turn into.
And in
Okay, right.
and in 3 as well, there are the barrels where you are the spider, or
Right,
You
okay.
are the
Yeah, you're right.
squawks.
Isn't Squawks in Donkey Kong Returns? Am I crazy?
He is, but he's like a helper. So
That's
there's
right,
like,
yeah,
there's
okay.
something, this was the Wii era of Nintendo, right? So there was like all these features for like little kids or casual gamers that like, because this game is like, gets pretty hard, like all the rest of the Donkey Kong games. It's not as hard as Tropical Freeze. That gets a lot harder. But like, this game had like the golden barrel where it's like you could just skip the stage if you lose enough times, and then it also has squawks that you can buy in Funky's shop, and squawks will like tell you where collectibles are, right?
Yeah.
So that's like kind of how he's in this game. I think that's probably worth mentioning too, is the collectibles in this game. I think that's where this game really starts to shine, and I think the retro games did a really good job of this, because Donkey Kong Country 2 and Donkey Kong Country 3 had all these weird collectibles that didn't track very well, and there was like a percentage counter on like how much of the game you've actually completed, but it was just hard to know how many secret exits there were in a level, how many bonus levels there were. This one is very clearly like you get something for getting all the Kong letters in every level and then completing a bonus level that pops up. And then also there's puzzle pieces, right? And it had a really good, easy way of tracking everything that there is for you to do, along with rewarding you with little things for each time you do it, right? So I thought that that's something that retro, they kind of simplified it in a way, made it a little less chaotic, but I think it's ultimately for the better. And that's something that I much prefer about this series.
I think there's like a lot of like quality of life updates like that. Like that is one quality of life update that I loved, because in the old ones, you collect Kong and you just get a life. This one, it's like you collect Kong in all the levels and you can get an extra like hard level. The other thing I really liked about this too is I think this is where they added the addition of just like the ground pound, where you're just like standing there and you just hit the ground. And that's like, that's a mechanic in and of itself, where there's like certain flowers or certain items that you do that and something will pop out of the secret. And I just really enjoyed that. I think also this is where they introduced in the other 3 games, you automatically grab onto everything. Is this where they introduced where you have to press a button to grab onto stuff?
I think so. Yeah. Or there's a dedicated grabbing onto vines button. And you can also grab barrels like that as well. Yeah. Before it was like the same button as the run button.
Yeah. Well, but then also like if you're jumping on a rope or a vine, you automatically grab onto it in 1 through 3. So I feel like that's just a big fundamental change that is like interesting in and of itself. But I mean, really, really nice way to update the franchise and bring it into a modern world as well. I do also just like that the levels change. And this is something that I really love, and I'll talk more about in Tropical Freeze, but like they change as you're going through them. And it just feels really nice to like play it. It made it feel really modern. Yeah.
Totally. I think that another thing that the retro Donkey Kong Country games really excel at is working the environment into the levels themselves. The Donkey Kong Country games for the Super Nintendo were super detailed and had amazing environments, but really they're kind of just mostly set dressing for what could just be square platforms. This really takes that to a different level, and I think it gets even further expanded in the next game. But with the ground pounding, like you said, all the little hidden items, the blowing, you blow on flowers and stuff like that. There's all these little things that are so easy to miss that are part of the environment, but it really rewards you for paying attention to the like really detailed art design that they put into all the environments, and it's just so impressive. And it's something that now I feel like the series is known for. And anything going forward will have to kind of incorporate that level of detail and environmental storytelling into the games themselves.
Well, let's rank this one. So is Donkey Kong Country Returns better than the original Donkey Kong Country?
Fuck. I don't think so.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think that don't get me wrong. I love this game. I've played this game 3 times. I played it on the Wii, I played it on the 3DS, and I played it on my Steam Deck in HD, emulating the Wii version of the game. I love it, and I go back to it, but I really do think that the original Donkey Kong is still a lot better. And And in a lot of ways, it's because of the originality of it and the personality and the like life and love that's put into it, not just on a level design and platforming perspective. And one example of that is this game doesn't have any original music in it whatsoever. Like almost all, I mean, there's like a couple songs here and there, but almost all the songs in this are like remixes of the original Donkey Kong Country game. And it kind of feels a little bit like it is a sequel to that original Donkey Kong Country game without really taking 2 and 3 into account in its like game design. And so because of that, the originality of it feels a little bit less to me. I think I would put the original Donkey Kong Country for the Super Nintendo over this game.
Jordan?
Hard disagree. I think this is better than
Wow.
Donkey Kong Country. I also just say that because I do think it's also better than Donkey Kong Country 3, but that's a whole nother conversation.
That's where it gets tricky.
Yeah, I don't know. I just really enjoyed this. I will get fucking lambasted for this, but like music in video games is not as important to me as it is a lot of other people. Like that,
Wow.
I didn't even notice that it was. When you said it's all remixes of original, I would never have noticed or really been bothered by that fact whatsoever. I was a little bit bothered by the lack of identity in the enemies, but the level design is so good and the modern like quality of life updates are so good, especially in the collectability and just like the feel of it. I'm like, oh, this is a fun game to play. I would throw this on, like, so that for me, that makes it a little bit better than the original Donkey Kong Country Returns. It builds on what that made that game great.
Interesting.
Patrick?
I haven't played it enough, you guys. This really makes me feel torn. I would have thought.
Then it goes to summer. It goes to summer.
David, I want so clarifying question. So you said that you've played this game 3 times.
Yeah.
How many times have you played the original Donkey Kong Country?
Like 15.
Oh, okay.
I've played the original Donkey Kong Country so many fucking times. I probably have that entire game memorized front to back. Yeah.
Okay.
This is also like a longer game, It's like, it takes longer, the levels are longer, it's a little bit more in depth. And don't get me wrong, I love all of these games. I would put all of these games in my like echelon of greatest games ever, but I do think the original Donkey Kong Country is better, even just in its simplicity, Patrick, what is it?
My knowledge of this game is so low, and you saying that the songs are all remixes. I feel like it's just easier for us to say it goes at the bottom. I don't like it.
Let's go. Let's go.
Like this might be what brings the podcast.
I love
Jordan's just gonna
cyber
get dunked
bullying
on.
Jordan.
Dude, like Donkey Kong Country 3 is such dog shit that the fact that this is like
Whoa!
I'm getting vicious. No.
Oh
No,
boy.
you bring up a good point though. This is what I was trying to figure out is like based on the types of arguments you guys are making about these games, and like now you're like going back on things that you've already said, right? David, you said that you thought 3.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we? Was better.
We're on
Man.
returns. Yeah.
Tell me
I think-
what are our current rankings right now?
Well, I
it
think
goes-
this is it, you guys. It goes 2, 3, 1 returns. Sorry.
2, 3, 1 returns, and it was.
I don't like it, but I think that's what we're doing.
I
so
like it.
remember now.
I agree.
So David, you were going on about how 3, even though like a lot of people don't like it, that you think it's better than original Donkey Kong because of all of the things that it added and elevated on the original, even though the original itself was so. But now we're saying that even though this does those same things, that it's not as good.
In a way, but it also like so much more. Where Donkey Kong Country 3 feels like. Okay, let me put it like this.
Please.
Like the Star Wars prequels, I like more than the Star Wars sequels, because like even though I think they're worse, maybe they're technically worse movies, they feel like a new original big swing where like The Force Awakens just feel like this is the Force Awakens of Donkey Kong Country. You know what I mean?
Thank you for
a perfectly fine movie. I enjoy it quite a lot, and in fact, I like it more than I like Force Awakens.
But it just standing alone, yeah, like sure.
Yeah, it just feels like it couldn't exist it relies so much on nostalgia for the original game to where something like Tropical Freeze, we'll get to in a second.
Let's
not.
get to it because I want to get to it because I actually feel very strongly about Tropical Freeze. Well,
I just don't know about Jordan 2 times in a row getting
we've decided we're cyberbullying Jordan, and that's just how it's going to be.
Jordan can have the Supreme Court asterisks dissenting opinion.
I would.
Is that how this works?
I also take my comments back. I do not think Donkey Kong Country 3 is a dog shit game.
Thank you.
I think it's a solid.
I can tell tensions were high, emotions were.
I'm sorry. I reacted that way. It's a solid 7 out of 10, but I still stand by the fact that Donkey Kong Country Returns is a more fun to play game than Donkey Kong Country 3.
That's okay. And 1, apparently, according to you. Yeah.
I wish I had played it more because I don't doubt that I might agree if I had played it more. But
we'll revisit this in a future episode. Yeah.
Let's move on to Tropical Freeze and briefly discuss it and then rank it. I love Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, y'all. I think that it's one of my favorite games of all time. And so it's going to be hard for me not to fight for this one. What does this one do better? Is it just this new version honed even more, right? Like the enemies have a little more identity because it's this invading Antarctic crew, right? I don't know what else is so good about it. The environment
is stronger. The theming is stronger. Like what David was saying about the Tiki guys, you just forget them when the game is done. But this one, it's like it all is cohesive around these Arctic themed enemies that it kind of carries from world to world. And I think that makes it a lot stronger. One thing I was just thinking about right now, but there's not text in these games, really. And that's why also I think we don't remember any of these characters. Whereas on Donkey Kong Country 1 through 3, you're having to read King K. Rool 30 or 40 times throughout the game. And it just kind of sticks in your brain a little bit more, I think.
Sure.
So I think, but having a more stronger and striking visual design makes up for that, so
yeah, I agree with you, although I do think the Kremlings on their own are much more memorable and a solid enemy. It's nice to have monkeys versus lizards, you know what I mean? It's just such a great, it's very much it's like Bowser versus Mario, it feels very that's a really great iconic matchup for enemies. I think that the enemies is probably still one of the weaker points of Tropical Freeze for me, but let's not get it fucking twisted. This game is a masterpiece. This is honestly, you're right, Patrick. I think this is one of the best platforming games of all time and one of the most fun games I've ever played. I've also played this a bunch of times, although I have not 100% of this game. I am still on my effort to go through this game. This is a hard game to 100%.
It is.
Yeah.
I've done it, but I have not 200%ed it because then once I don't even think you have to 100% it to unlock hard mode or whatever, which is not for me. And all the time trials, I have not platinumed or whatever every level, but I have gotten every puzzle piece. And I did that the second time I played through it. And I've played through it since then again. And man, yeah, it is hard. There were a few of those rocket barrel levels where I had to play them 30, 50 times just to get a couple puzzle pieces. Because those are almost auto scrollers where if you miss it, you're well, we
didn't really touch on that, but that's something that the Donkey Kong Country series is known for. Is it's really excellent auto scrollers.
Yeah,
right?
The mine
carts, vehicle stuff. So much so that they're making a whole ride out of it at the Universal Park, right? But yeah, this game does that really well. And what you said, Jordan, I think that this game has its own identity in an incredible way. I think that it really all the negatives that I said about Donkey Kong Country Returns, reminder, a game that I love, all the negatives I said about that game are no longer issues in this game whatsoever, right? It's got its own identity. The environmental storytelling is dialed up to fucking 15 out of 10, right? So much more so than they ever did in Returns. It's got an entirely original soundtrack from David Wise, the original composer of the game, with honestly some of the best music in the entire series is in this game. I love it so much. And then on top of that, where in Donkey Kong Country Returns, your only person you could play as was Diddy, this gives you so many people to play as. You can play as Donkey Kong, Diddy Kong, Dixie Kong, and for the first time ever, Cranky Kong, which is a really cool addition to the game. And if you're a little baby that can't play hard games, you've also got Funky Kong in the version for the Switch as well, which is a great thing for people that are not good at hard games like this, but still want to enjoy the storytelling and the environmental aspects of this game that work so well.
And also, it's kind of just fun to play as Funky Kong and just blaze through it. Which I just talking about this. There's that level where you have the animals that they go up and down, and you jump from them. And my son made this when he was like 4 or something, watching me play this little giraffe stick thing. That's
really nice. Thanks
and that also has the best song, I think, in my opinion. That level.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Anything else before? I mean, there's so much.
There's so much more we could say. I mean, the collectibles, like you said, that they just really even made that even better and tighter than they had already done an amazing job with in the Wii game. The graphics are incredible for a Wii U game, so much so that they didn't have to improve any of it for the Switch release. It looks exactly the same and still looks amazing. On top of that, it's like the tone and the vibe of this game and how they work everything in, it really drives that environmental stuff up to 11. It's like, and the way that the worlds connect through each level, it's like each individual world that you play through, the progression of the levels all kind of tell their own story from like the beginning to the end in a way that is just so satisfying. It's like, it's really hard to put into words until you've actually played the game, but there are just so many moments where I just sat back and was just like, you son of a bitch. Like, I just can't believe somebody actually like designed this game like this. It's really a sight to behold. And yeah, I think it's the best Wii U game. And Breath of the Wild came out on that thing.
Yeah, that's a pretty bold statement, but I might have to agree.
Yeah. Well, let's start in the middle-ish of where we are, which is Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze better than the original Donkey Kong Country?
Yes.
Indubitably.
Yeah. Is Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze better than Donkey Kong Country 3?
He won't even let you finish.
Dixie Kong's Double Trouble.
I would agree.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that it is better than Donkey Kong Country 3.
It is. No question there. Is it better than Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest?
This is the hard one.
Yeah, this is
the hard one. This is the hard one because I would consider both games to be absolutely masterclasses in platforming design, game design, music, everything about both of these games is absolutely incredible. If I had to vote based on how much I want to go back and replay them on a regular clip, I would put Donkey Kong Country 2 for the Super Nintendo above Tropical Freeze. But that is a very, very hard choice I have to make. But that is where I stand on the matter.
I'm going to vote for Tropical Freeze.
Okay. Well, so I'm really torn for this because, I had played Diddy's Kong Quest probably like twice back in the day. And in preparation for this podcast, I was playing Donkey Kong Country 3. And after the first world, I was just so frustrated. I loved the first world boss, but I was so frustrated. I was like, I'm going to go back and play Diddy's Kong Quest and just see how I feel about this franchise. Like, am I misremembering like how great these games are? And I just started playing Donkey Kong Country 2 and I'm almost done. Like, I just started playing it and I just didn't stop. And I did not go back to Donkey Kong Country 3 until yesterday because I was just like having such a good time playing Diddy's Kong Quest. That being said, I believe in progress, and I think Tropical Freeze really pulled the franchise into the future. But the reason I'm really torn is because I would more readily go back and play Diddy's Conquest before I went back and played Tropical Freeze. However, I do think Tropical Freeze is the better game at its core. The thing that I have a problem with Tropical Freeze is it is so difficult at sometimes. I just get frustrated. I get mad. And I'm like, I have to turn this game off. Whereas,
those bonus levels in DKC2, though, are so hard.
Yeah, they're true. Tough levels in all of them.
Yeah.
I feel the opposite of you guys. And that's why it's very clear for me that if you said, which game do you want to play right now? I'd pick Tropical Freeze.
I just like the extended levels as well. Like they're like, oh, instead of just doing like a 2 to 3 minute level, we're going to do these like 5 minute long levels, and it takes you a long time to process it. But so, I mean, for me, I really do put Tropical Freeze above Diddy's Conquest. And that's very tough because I think they're both 11 out of 10 games. They're both fantastic.
I'm not even mad about that. It's not how I would vote, but I'm not mad. I can totally see that, and in a way, I agree with you, and I'm very happy to have Tropical Freeze up at the top of our list.
Well, I think that this is it then. This is our official rankings. So I'll read them out just one time before we close out, and if anybody has to say anything, final thoughts, that's fine. But our official rankings are best game in series, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Next up, Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest. Next, Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble. Then the original Donkey Kong Country, followed by, at the bottom, Donkey Kong Country Returns. Not everyone can be happy when we do these. Not everyone can be happy.
Think about the engagement we're about to have. Okay? Look at the bright side here.
So there you have it. Unequivocal rankings there.
That's true. This is an objective list, as we often say.
So there's so many more things I wanted to say about Donkey Kong Country as a franchise. We don't have time. Like, this series nails water levels like no other series does. Like, there's a few other things that are just so iconic about the series we didn't even really get to talk about because we wanted to focus on the differences and stuff. But I love these games. I will play Returns, and then I will either come back and say I'm sorry, or no, I'm good about it. We'll find out.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. You really can't go wrong with any of these. I think a lot of people are going to be pissed that Donkey Kong Country 3 isn't at the very bottom of this list. But hey, them's the breaks. But seriously, all of these games are amazing, and it's awesome that every one of these 5 games is about to be on the Switch.
That's true. All right, well, that's going to do it then for our main topic of ranking the Donkey Kong Country games. We're going to take another short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the games we've been playing recently. We are back, and it is now just the 3 of us. Summer had to duck out on this due to some weather and tornado warnings in the area. So we're going to finish out the episode, the games we've been playing.
Hopefully by the end of this, we have confirmation that Summer's house is still there and they're still alive. Yeah. Glenn Powell has passed on by.
But just to finish out the episode then, this past week I have been playing some Smash and a lot of Minecraft as always, but I don't want to talk about those things. I want to talk about Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins. So this is one of my Mario blind spots, and I fired it up on NSO when kind of by accident, I went like last minute, went to like my wife was going to take my kid to one of his classes, but then she couldn't at the very last second. And so I had to like grab my stuff and go. And I was like, what do I do for an hour while he's in there? I just grabbed my Switch Lite, which has like nothing on it because it was right next to me. And then I was like, I'll just find something on NSO, and found this game, which was kind of the perfect game for that situation. Cause I got like more than halfway through it in an hour. And then the next day I took him to something else where I sat down. It's like, I know what I'm going to do. And I beat it in 2 play sessions, which is pretty short. And
longer than the original Mario Land.
Yeah, which I couldn't remember. I knew that one was short, and I knew this was longer, so I was kind of surprised by how short it was, and I wasn't disappointed or anything. I actually was like, that was nice. That was a nice bite-sized experience kind of a thing.
And it still feels like an accomplishment when
and it did, yeah. Like I beat a game.
Yeah.
And also, like I think I've heard so many good things about it, and I enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. And I played through it and I beat it. But I think the physics threw me off at first for a little bit because it's a little floatier than other Mario games. And like, there's a lot of those space levels and things where like, I was like adjusting. But I definitely enjoyed it. And, and it's a Game Boy. So there's chugging a little bit when there's like more than 2 or 3 enemies on the stage. But I had a really good time playing through this game, and I see why people like it. And if I had played it when I was a kid, I would have more nostalgia for it and all that. But crossed one of my Marios off the list. I don't think there's a whole lot else to say about it. But it was fun.
Yeah, I love that game quite a bit. If you do go back and replay it ever, Patrick, I really recommend the DX color hack for that. It's definitely a game that like is so cartoony to begin with. So when you add color into it, it feels very, very natural, like a natural extension of that. And I think it really improves the game.
Wasn't there a Game Boy Color version? It's not on NSO. I actually fired it up and then was like, wait, where's my color option? And I couldn't find it.
No, there is no official color version. It's like a fan-made mod.
Okay, it is.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely love that game, dude. I played that game probably 20 times growing up because it was something I got so good at the game. I could just throw it on and beat it in like an hour and then go about the rest of my day like as a kid just growing up.
So many interesting like characters and villains that aren't in any of the other Mario games too.
It's got that going on for it, like the first Mario Land as well, where like and Wario's in it.
And the theming, there's a Jason character. All right, sorry, I'm going to stop.
We're too in the like ranking episode mindset. Let's get through this fast.
All right, I'll go next then because I literally just played Donkey Kong Country games in preparation for this. I was already playing Tropical Freeze, and so I just continued my playthrough of that, and then I kind of got a little bit derailed. So I'm now in World 6 of Tropical Freeze. Just beat that big old polar bear. And then, so I started playing Donkey Kong Country 3 once we were like talking about doing this episode. And I was like, that's like a big blind spot. I need to get into it. I got to about World 4. I beat all the way through World 4 just so I'd have a pretty well-informed opinion about half the game, or at least half the levels. I assume there's 8 worlds. I don't really know. Anyway, whatever. And then, and then I started playing Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest, and I'm almost done with that game. I am in the last world right now. So that's it.
Hell yeah.
David,
very good. I got you. Yeah. I really recommend, by the way, whenever you do eventually finish Donkey Kong Country 3, watch the GDQ speed run of the Game Boy Advance game. A really fun speed run with lots of really cool glitches. But sadly, we're going to miss out on some of Summer's games that they've been playing recently because they sounded really interesting, but hopefully we'll get to those next week. But as far as me, I've been playing quite a bit of games. Some of the Legend of Starfy and Splatoon, like I talked about earlier. But other than that, mainly on my GBA, or not my GBA, but my Anbernic SP emulator that I have when I was in New York. Pretty much every time I would get on the train, I would whip out my SP and I was playing Klonoa Empire of Dreams for the Game Boy Advance. And that's such an incredible game. I actually beat that. I rolled credits on it. Didn't beat it while I was in New York. It was like right after I came back, I finished it up. There's some bonus levels that I haven't played yet, but it's really good. Such an awesome puzzle platformer. The handheld Klonoa games are way slower paced and not as story driven and much more about like puzzle solving in a platforming environment and much more about like collecting all the items as you go than the other Klonoa games are. And I just really enjoyed it. And I think it works really well in that Game Boy Advance form factor. And just love that game so much. And that's kind of gotten me into a bit of a Klonoa headspace. And I fired up the original Door to Phantom Isle as well for the original PlayStation 1. And I'm also playing that on that Anbernic RG35XX SP. Such a fun name for a system to say over and over again. But, I played the remake to this in the Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series for the Switch. But I actually kind of even maybe prefer the PS1 original. It's got such a beautiful aesthetic to it. The story is amazing. The music is incredible. And it's just all around a really, really great game. And it's just, especially with all this like crazy, like presidential assassination attempts that are happening right now, it's been nice to retreat to my happy place in the Klonoa universe. So I've been really enjoying that. Another game I played when I was in New York with my buddy Andrew, shout out to Andrew who let me stay with him the entire time I was there. We played a lot of co-op Spelunky 2. We never made it very far. I think we made it to the jungle a few times, but didn't do very well. Andrew likes to kind of speed forward ahead of me where I'm like, dude, bro, slow down, and then kills us both. But that's kind of part of the fun of that game is the chaos and the hilarity hilarity that ensues with all the game's interconnecting systems and everything like that. So very fun game. I'm hoping that we could play a lot more of that online, and maybe he'll learn to slow down a little bit when we can play that fucking thing properly. Lastly, or a couple last ones, Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble, I've been getting a lot more into. I beat the main game, which is 100 levels, and now there's an extra 100 levels in the like EX versions of the worlds that you play through. So I'm working my way through that right now. I'm almost through, I think, world 8 of the EX stages, or maybe it's world 7. Either way, that game just gets better and better and better the further it goes. Like the longer you get into the expert levels of those stages, it becomes much more like those original 1 and 2. And it's such a wonderful game. I can't recommend it enough. I'm just really loving Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble. And I think it's already on sale, which doesn't bode well for its sales figures, but I think you can get it for like $35 now. And the original game, at least Banana Mania, the remakes of the original games, you can find on sale for like $6 or $7 right now. So it's a really good time to get into that franchise. Those 2 games in particular are the ones you should pick up. And then lastly, I just want to say, based off of what y'all talked about last week about F-Zero 99, I picked it back up, and there is a lot more than emotes, Patrick, added to this. In this version of the game, they have added rivals. They added, there's a whole like festival going on right now, and you can get festival bits as you go, and there's festival versions of the stage. There are mirror modes of all the stages now, which is really interesting. So they've really expanded that game without just like straight up adding new courses in a way that's actually really satisfying. And I think they actually completely also changed up how team battles work. So now instead of 2 teams, there are like 5 teams of 10 people each. And they lowered it to 50 players instead of 99 for team battles, which just makes a lot more sense and is a lot more manageable, especially as the player base is waning a little bit. It makes sense to add modes that don't have quite as many bots playing alongside you, because the bots are always going to be at the end of the pack anyway. But I've been really enjoying getting back into this game, and I'm looking forward to playing it a lot more as we go forward. But yeah, that's what I've been playing recently. And I'm looking forward to playing more of that game.
Very nice. Well, that's going to do it then for this Donkey Kong Country Rankings episode. Thanks to MilkyWay.co, who does our website. Thanks to Corduroy, who does our music. Thanks to all our patrons over on Patreon. If you're looking for me, Patrick, you can find me online as PDYX.
You can find me everywhere on the internet at Boardan.
You can find Summer, hopefully, in their house and not in some ditch somewhere. But anyway, you can find me. We'll let you guys know. I mean, Summer just messaged us in the Discord, so I think that they're okay. But you can find me online at Monolith Fiji, pretty much everywhere on the internet. And if you'd like to find our show on social media, we are at Switch Headz on Twitter, at Super Switch Headz on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We got a website, switchheadz.com. And we have a Facebook group, Discord, and Patreon. We'll have links to all 3 of those in the description of this episode, whether you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any of these other podcasting platforms. Make sure you leave us a review, leave us a like and subscribe on YouTube. Tell your friends about the show and help us grow and reach a bigger audience, because we love having you guys around. And we'd love to see you in the Discord. Please join us over there. That's going to do it for this episode on Donkey Kong. Ooh, I could talk about Donkey Kong all fucking day, baby. We'll be back next week with another banger, so don't touch that dial. We got a fun game coming out next week. Can't wait to talk about it. But in the meantime, you guys know the drill. Stay safe out there. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Why don't you get inside a barrel and wait for your best friend to find you and break you out, and then you can go on an adventure with him or her or them. Anyway, would love you guys very much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.